What's going on, y'all? Thanks for checking in with Callie. Please like, subscribe if you haven't already. So, everything that's happened with the Clippers so far this offseason has been pretty fair, at the very least. Most would say very good, with the trades that they had, the buyouts, and just collecting players that, can give them a chance to be at least a contender. Now, of course, we have to see over time if that really stands to be true, because a lot of the players that they have are elder statesmen in a lot of people's eyes. And if you look at the league, majority of the league is getting younger and stronger and more physical, and they're just more active and more younger and more youth in so many ways, more than the Clippers, because the Clippers have gotten Bradley Beal, Bradley Beal's a little bit older than what he was on Washington, and he's still a good player, but probably not the player he was on the Wizards. And you look at Brook Lopez, he's been in the league a long time. Then John Collins is a veteran in the league now, and then finally we get to Chris Paul. Now, honestly, this could be a fairy tale ending for Chris Paul. Might be the best situation that he could have asked to be in, because the last time he was looked at as a superstar in some people's eyes at his peak, when he was with the Clippers and he was playing his best basketball of his career. Now, some could say for the Phoenix Suns as well, because he did help lead them to a finals, and he was a big part of that. So, you could say he was still a superstar then, but on the Clippers, it was no doubt he was a superstar in the league, and he was a top 5 point guard in the league at that time. So his last peak at his superpowers at his very best is probably in a Clippers uniform. And the fact that he's back on the Clippers and he's coming in with a lesser role with all the talent that the Clippers have around them from top to bottom, on their team, it really can be a fairy tale ending for him if he ends up with a championship. And honestly, this is probably the Clippers' last opportunity to get a championship, because if you look at after next season, they might be a completely different team roster-wise and maybe even coach-wise. Maybe Ty Lue's not even there. So many changes can concur if this doesn't work out. But hopefully it does, for the Clippers' sake, because they have a loaded roster. Even though they have a loaded roster full of guys who've been in the league a long time, veterans and things like that, they still have a roster that's on paper good enough to be a contender for a championship. So honestly, this is a great situation for Chris Paul, because where he was with the Spurs, they weren't going to win a championship no time soon, even though Wemby is a good young player, but he's already showing signs of being injured this early in his career. He hasn't even accomplished anything yet. So, you got to look at that from a standpoint of, the potential of the Spurs is good long term because they have a franchise player in Wemby, but he's just not ready yet. He's not there yet. And it might take him some time. It might take them some time to win a championship, because it's not like Popovich is in the head coaching seat as well. So, that's the situation where he wasn't really going anywhere or had a chance to win. And if he, now that he's on the Clippers, he definitely has a chance to win, because Kawhi is still good enough, I think, to lead a team to a championship. And I think that James Harden is still good enough to be, a good enough player, a great enough player to give them the assist they need, be the point guard they need, and score. And I would say Bradley Beal is definitely good enough to be a third or fourth guy on a team that's contending for a championship, just because of the two-way player he was, and the fact that he could still put up like close to 20 points. I think that helps their cause of basically having that third or fourth guy to put up points when they need to, almost as they had last year with Norman Powell, despite the fact Norman Powell didn't show up in the playoffs. But maybe Bradley Beal will do something that Norman Powell didn't do, hopefully. But of course, we'll see what happens. There's no guarantees with that, or no guarantees with anything. You can have most stacked roster in the world. You can have big threes, big four on your team. And we've seen teams like that, not win it. We've seen the big three with the Miami Heat back in the day with LeBron, D. Wade, and Bosh, and they lost their first year, with a team assembled that was as good as theirs. And we all thought they were unbeatable, especially with a LeBron in his prime, and D. Wade still had a little bit left, and Chris Bosh was still, a very formidable, big man forward in the league, so it's no guarantee, but it's definitely a better opportunity for Chris Paul, and I guarantee he's definitely, jumping up and down at the opportunity, especially coming back in front of the fans that he probably loved, one of the most, beloved fans that he's, loved in his career, because, the Clippers fans have shown him a lot of love throughout the years, and had his back, because he definitely was carrying the franchise, even though I thought Blake was like the so-called guy for the team. But Chris Paul was really the engine that kept it going. And me, honestly, I always looked at this Chris Paul's team more than Blake, because Blake was just a dunker, highlight guy, but his game was never really built for championships, which is the reason why I think that they couldn't win. If he had somebody like Kawhi Leonard on the Clippers back then, I think they definitely probably would have won a championship with somebody like Chris Paul and Kawhi, because the basketball IQ is higher. Whereas Blake Griffin had a lot of talent, but his basketball IQ wasn't as high as I thought, it should have panned out to be. But I mean, either way, it doesn't matter. He's here now. Chris Paul's here now, and they can just try to, see what they can get out of him at this late in his stage of his career. And the fact that they don't really need much out of Chris Paul, just need him to run the second unit, and he has full control. He'll probably have full control of the second unit, and as long as he can average somewhere around close to 8 assists, which he did about last season on the Spurs, and maybe give him about 10 points, Chris Paul can do that. He can give you 10 and 8, 10 and 7 a game, and that's all they really need, as long as he don't turn the ball over, which Chris Paul has always been pretty good when it comes to turnovers. He's always been one of the best point guards in the league, because like I said, his IQ has always been so high. Even though he doesn't have the speed and everything he used to have, he still knows where everybody needs to be and can put them in place and move guys with his eyes and move guys with his positioning of the ball and how he sets up plays. He's almost like a coach on the floor. And I think Ty Lue will benefit a lot from a player like Chris Paul, because there's less communication he'll have to do on the floor, because he'll be able to trust Chris Paul to make the right decision and turn the ball over less, which can also help James Harden not turn the ball over as much, with Chris Paul being on the floor at times, and it takes the ball out of James Harden's hand, and he could play off the ball rather than being the distributor and a scorer. So, I mean, it all works out if everybody stays healthy and their age doesn't become a factor. So we'll have to see how it goes, and I definitely think Kawhi benefit from a Chris Paul, because everybody knows where Kawhi likes it, in the mid-range. But Kawhi is pretty much a scorer anywhere. And if you catch him, you find him for wide open shots for threes in the corner or the top of the elbow or the top of the key, he's going to knock those down too. So Kawhi is definitely a check mark. But I think, Chris Paul's presence definitely helps Bradley Beal and all of them. So we'll see what happens. And hopefully the fairy tale ending ends in a championship.